What is good, my ex-homies? It's your boy Jacob Gooden. We are back another week, another Ex-Homeschooler Club. That's right, the best ex-homeschooler podcast this side of the internet. I'm in a good mood. Can you tell? I'm singing. I don't sing for very many people, but why am I in such a good mood? My friend RB is in the studio today. Okay, it's a Zoom call. I'll give you that. But you know what I mean. I'm having my friend RB on the show today. We're going to talk about his homeschool experience. We're going to talk about growing up in two different states, being homeschooled in both. We're going to talk about curriculum. We're going to talk about the role that religion played in his homeschool experience. We're going to talk about the after years and the after effects of homeschooling. And we're going to touch on like friendship and specifically male friendship, but adult friendship in general, and the difficulty that is. So before I turn it over to past me, I got a favor to ask, okay? That is, if you enjoy this show, whether it's today's episode, whether it's a previous episode, do me a favor. Share it with a friend. Shoot him a text, shoot him an email, whatever you got to do. Maybe you see him in person this week. Tell him about the show. Say, hey, I've been watching this podcast. I've been listening to this podcast. Would love if you checked it out, okay? Thank you in advance from me. I'm going to stop rambling. Let's turn it over to past me. Well, RB, we're here. It is our second time meeting, but I'm so stoked to share your story with my audience and for them to meet you and hear what you've got to say. I don't want to give too much fluff at the beginning. I want to just kind of get right into it of like, what is your story? Can you give us a little bit, set the stage, so to speak, of your homeschool experience? Were you homeschooled all the way through? Siblings? I know when we chatted previously, you moved around a little bit and things shifted because of the moves and things like that. So lay a little foundation and then we'll go from there.
I love it. I love it. And thanks for having me on the show. This has been fantastic, and it's been cool to listen and in some ways connect to other people. I know there's one show, like I now follow her on Instagram, and that's fantastic to meet other people and really to hear other people's experiences, because one thing I will say about my experiences, and it's true for everyone, it's unique. I would not wish my experience on anyone else, but I also know that my experience of homeschooling is not exclusive, or is not indicative of everyone's, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Yeah.
So I was born in Pennsylvania and primarily lived in a little town near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania called West Newton. And we were the first homeschooling family in our county, and definitely within our school district. Um, and when I was 13, my family moved from Pennsylvania to Kansas, and I continued being homeschooled and was homeschooled through to when I went to college. And then about 7 years ago, moved down here as an adult, but moved down to Texas. So that's where I live now. And so yeah, so being homeschooled in two different states is something we could definitely chat about. And I would say that the experiences were different each place. But I'm the oldest of five, and born early 80s. So the earliest memory I have as a kid is seeing the space shuttle explode, on
Okay.
TV. That was like that was a huge deal for us because first of all, we really didn't watch TV. I think our total time of having cable as a kid was like 6 months, and that was like a big deal. Like here we are, this tiny homeschooling family. Like my sisters at the time were, they I don't even think they had started school, and I was just learning to read. But it's like, oh my God, we get to watch TV, and I remember my mom, like, right after it happened, turned it off. I don't know what happened after that. I was what, 4 at the time, but I was like, that was like my one of my intros to the outside world was like, oh, we're gonna watch this really cool, and there's a school teacher on the space shuttle, and it blew up. And we'll move on with our lives now.
Yeah. Oh man. That's that. I don't know. Your explaining of that is taking me back to I'm a kid of I was born in 96. And so 9/11, when 9/11 happened, I vividly remember that day watching the
Yeah.
news and seeing it happen. And I know it's very different circumstances, obviously, but I remember as a kid, and then it's like the TV turns off, and it's like, okay, we just go on with our day, apparently. Um, so I know that feeling that you're talking about of that, like something
Yes.
really tragic just happened, and now we just have to be normal again. Like, how does that work?
Right. And that, kids, is why we don't interact with the outside world.
Yeah, yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the early day Pennsylvania. Like you said, you're like
Yeah.
first kind of like homeschool family in that area. Like, what did that look like? Because I know that when, like I said, I'm a kid of the late '90s, so 2000s was more of my era of homeschooling. A lot more solidified at that point. There was a lot more. I also grew up in California, so the rules are different. But like, there's a lot more like guidelines of like you have to register your school or maybe you have to take your kids in for that. So like was there anything like that growing up or what, or were you just figuring it out?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of figuring it out. And I would say when we were when we were homeschooling in Pennsylvania, it was very much, I think, a replication of what my mom remembered her public school experience being, but at home. So we had desks in the kitchen space that were basically like old school, um, desks that had the flip up
Right.
top. We kept all our books in them, and we would start school at a certain time, and we had our different subjects that we would do. I think we started school at like 8, and we would say the Pledge of Allegiance and pray, and then school was over at like 3 or 3:30. We got like 30 minutes for recess to go outside and run around like crazy people. Um, but I remember one of the first experiences interacting with a public school was, at the time, you had to present a portfolio to the principal of the school that you would have been going to. So I think it wasn't every year, but I remember going to our local elementary school and sitting there and him having like a binder of all of my work from the last year, and him just, going through it. Um, and even at that time, I remember him saying like, this looks good, it seems like you're pretty smart. And um I got that a lot as a kid. I as the it's one of the things I'm sure we'll get into, but as the oldest, as the oldest and as a boy, a lot of the resources that my family had went towards me and my education at the expense of my sisters, which is one of the things that I regret about my homeschooling experience. But so in Pennsylvania, very, very like, you got to check in with the school so often. I think we had to take a standardized test. I remember taking one at one point. This very fuzzy memory. Then when we got to Kansas, it was literally the Wild West. Um, there was basically no oversight. You did have to register a school name, and our school name was Providential Academy of the Great Plains, because my dad wanted to be a cowboy so bad, or a pioneer and a blacksmith. Anyhow, so this long ass name, but basically they were like, you need to do school this many days of the year, and you need to register. Outside of that, you're on your own.
Okay.
Um so different experience. So like I said, I was 13 when we moved to Kansas. My The schooling changed a little bit, mainly because we were, number one, we were in smaller houses. Um and we in Pennsylvania, we had a larger house with enough space for us to have desks. When we got to Kansas, we mainly stayed in rented smaller houses, and so there wasn't room for desks. So we would generally work either like in the living room on the couch or at the kitchen table. But kind of still the concept of, you started school at a certain time, you ended school at a certain time, and and then I would say when I was about 15, 16, the subject matters, the subjects were beyond my mom's education. So I started doing like video courses and kind of taking some more control over my schedule.
Hmm.
As long as I documented what I did, I would get up sometimes at like 5 or 6 in the morning and start school then. Just it was easier in a small confined space where, we ended up, um, we were a family. We had 3 kids for a while, and then there's 15 years between my brother and I. So when he came along, and then my youngest sister came along, now there's small children in the house, and we're trying to study. So
Right.
um, yeah, the experience changed some, um, but the legislation was wildly different between the two states.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I think a lot of, I'm also the oldest of my homeschool world, and it's just me and my sister, so much smaller environment. But yeah, I mean, we didn't have desks. We did school at the dinner table, and we did end
Hmm.
up getting desks in our bedrooms, but we didn't have like a school room or anything like that. But I totally relate when you talk about like getting older and then kind of starting to take charge of your own education and build out your own um, kind of plan. And like I was more of a night person, so I would, everyone would be asleep and I'd be working late into the night, but then I'd stay in bed till like noon, which I don't think my mom loved, but I think she just got to a point where she's like, I can't really fight him on it at this point. Like he's just that's the way he's doing it, and everything's getting done.
Yeah.
But I relate to that a little bit. And we did have a little period of time when I was in high school of we had a couple other kids come into our house. We were looking to adopt, but
Mm.
it threw a wrench in everything because they were younger, and it was just, like you said, it was just all of a sudden it was crowded, and it was like I now need a better system to get this done, right? So it's just like
Yeah.
finding those times to do it on your own was difficult. But I know you had mentioned, I think this was in our previous conversation, that Abeka tended to be like a pretty consistent thing
Yes.
throughout your experience, which like a lot of homeschool families, that's very common. I don't think it's the worst
Hmm.
curriculum in the world. It gets you kind of where you need to go sometimes, but it doesn't work for everybody. But it's very much like you were talking about, that traditional school experience, because it's
Yes.
designed for a classroom. So I do wonder, because I don't want to say I never took video classes, but that transition from
Mhm.
going like mom is teaching to like, okay, now I just watch a video and do it. Was that a good thing for you, or was that like, this is really tough?
It was a good thing for me because, like I said, it was when I got into like algebra 2, and geometry and things that my mom was not skilled at,
Hmm.
and the opportunity to learn from people who that was their bread and butter, really kind of my first like actual teacher experience. What was very positive for me. And it was also interesting because it was a new company. I think it was called Greatest Teachers of America or Superstar Teachers of America, but they were public school teachers.
Okay.
And they would go in and film. They wouldn't film the classroom, but they'd film lectures that they gave. And I actually ended up corresponding briefly with the chemistry teacher because he he, he had the driest sense of humor I think I'd ever seen. And I felt a connection with him. And then when I did the workbook, almost all of the answers were wrong in the answer key.
Okay.
And so I did all of the problems multiple times and then actually mailed, like, this is what I think the actual answers are, to this guy I'd never met, didn't know me. And they ended up mailing it back and saying, oh wow, yeah, all of our answers were incorrect. Thank you for thank you for correcting us. Here's a free video course. You get to pick anything else you want to take. And um and then I think I got a letter from the actual like science teacher, and the most important thing to him was that I understood he's not the one who wrote the answer key.
He was like, not me, not my fault.
That was not me.
Yeah, we
But
some
that was
intern did
actually
that. Yeah.
right. That was actually a cool experience though, because thinking back, I had like their whole curriculum to choose from, and I chose this like how to learn. Um, and it was a shorter course, but I remember something from that course has stuck with me my whole life, and that was that the act of learning is connecting old stuff to new stuff. And so when you're trying to remember something, you're trying to understand a concept, if you can relate it in some way to a concept you already know, and that's basically systems
Right.
thinking. And but I remember that as being like that's a nugget that I got out of this weird experience where I corrected my science teacher's answer key.
Yeah. Look at you, RB out here being like better, yeah, like more. You're proof that homeschoolers are smarter than other people.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that vehemently. But it's interesting because that ties into this concept that you and I have chatted about, where I feel like in some ways, in my experience, I am an accidental success of homeschooling and of my environment. And that, yeah, whenever you're ready to dig into that's kind of a
I did want to kind of dig into that because you made the comment before about you feel like a lot of the resources your family had were poured into you as a student, but your
yeah,
sisters were lacking. And so, if you wouldn't mind, just like unpack that a little bit, and then yeah,
sure.
why that, how that then ties into being like an accidental success in your environment.
Yeah. So there, I'm gonna fair warning, if you're watching this podcast, this will get religious. Um,
Yep.
because one of the unique things, and it's not unique to me, but one of the things that shaped my homeschooling experience was obviously the reasons why my parents chose to homeschool, and then the environment which I did grow up in being homeschooled. And so the reason that my parents homeschooled was primarily fear-based. They were genuinely, I believe this, they were genuinely trying to do the right thing. They were trying to do the best thing for their kids. But that meant that their previous trauma dictated the decisions that they made, which were that's the outside world. We're going to create a safe space for you to grow up in, and we're going to educate you as best as you can, and that will give you a better chance in life.
Hmm.
So along with that, because our I like to say I grew up in a cult because that's the easiest way to explain it in the simplest way. But independent fundamentalist Baptist, Reformed Baptist, that was our primary. I think we went to a Presbyterian church for a while, but then my dad had a argument with the elders about whether baptism was immersion or sprinkling, and then we left that church. And um but the part of what we were indoctrinated into in Pennsylvania, but almost more so in Kansas, was patriarchy. So the concept that the man is the head of the family, the man is the breadwinner, the man basically runs everything, the wife is to submit. And so if you look at education of children from that context of the man's going to make the money, the woman's going to cook and clean and be at home and have babies, then the results of the education are going to be drastically different based on the gender of the student. And so in my case, I had more opportunities than my sisters did. And okay, let's let you play baseball. Like I played baseball for 2 years from 9 to 10, right? They were never given that opportunity.
Right.
They were basically taught, all the math you need to know is fractions so that you can convert recipes and be able to balance a checkbook. And so when I say that I am an accidental success, like I am successful in my career professionally, but that came, I feel like, at a cost of I'm the one who went to college. My parents didn't pay for college, but I lived at home. They obviously helped in all the ways that they could to get me through that experience. I landed a good job. So at 23, I'm an engineer working at Cessna, and my sisters are, at home cooking and cleaning and with no higher education whatsoever. So I it's one of those things that when I tell people I'm homeschooled and they see the success in my life, I don't want that correlation. I don't want that correlation of I'm successful because I was homeschooled, or I was, I'm smarter because I was homeschooled. And that was one of the justifications that my parents would use, was they would point to someone and they would say, so and so was homeschooled and look what they did with their life.
Right.
And once I got old enough to realize, like, that gymnast was homeschooled because they're a professional gymnast and they
Right.
literally had a tutor living in their house, homeschool. Like, that is not the same, right? But to make an equality statement that, because you were homeschooled, that's going to equal this, is something that when I get into this depth of conversation about homeschooling, I try to make a clear delineation that there is not I do not see necessarily a correlation between someone who is homeschooled and someone who is successful later in life.
No, I agree with you. I think I also had a little bit of that. Not that I didn't
Hmm.
view I viewed it as other people could also be successful, but I the stats and things that I was being given was kind of like homeschoolers can accomplish XYZ faster,
Right.
quicker, they're better at it,
Hmm.
Um, there was a point where like I was going to do college while I was in high school, and so I was going to graduate high school and college roughly at the same time, and things played out. I do think that like my home education helped me in college. I did college in 3 years, which was like,
Hmm.
but I busted ass to do it, right? Like I
Right.
worked really hard. Now that's not exclusively a homeschool thing. I just know that the tools that I was given, especially in those high school years, we talked about the independent study, that helped me significantly to be able to do that, because I could just hone in and be like, I got to do this XYZ. I'm okay with working in the summers. Like it's all good. I was okay with that because of my previous experience, but that doesn't,
Yeah.
it didn't equal I'm actually just smarter than everybody. I'm still sometimes the dumbest guy in the room. Um, but,
Same.
it just kind of, like you said, it shapes you to who you are, but it also, I
Mhm.
agree with you in that, like, I saw some of that in my homeschool world as well, where like
Mhm.
sometimes the guys were treated in a different standard and way than the girls were, and that was kind of an interesting thing. It also, like you said, religion ties into it. There's purity culture aspect. There's all this other stuff that plays into, you know, well, the girls are going to be barefoot and pregnant for, all of their 20s, kind of a deal, which is a,
Yeah.
is a little bit of a, it's kind of a dangerous game to play, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because I see that in my friends from growing up. I see some of them who have struggled because of that lack of education. So,
Yeah.
you know, how is
Yeah.
that?
And to be clear, like, my sisters are doing very well for themselves.
Yeah,
I don't mean to paint a picture that isn't true. It's just I wish that they had the same opportunities
right.
that I had had, that there had been equality. I think I growing up in a larger family and around lots of large families, they there's an undeniable advantage and disadvantage to being the oldest. You tend to just naturally get more opportunities. You also are the experiment child for a
Yes.
lot of things. Like, your parents learned on you, and then and then took those learnings and applied them to your siblings. So yeah, and it's also been interesting. Like I said, my brother's 15 years younger than I am, and my sister's younger than that. They grew up without so much of the religious aspect, but more of the homeschooling aspect. And I was chatting with my brother, and he was openly musing about like when I have kids, maybe I'll homeschool. And I just was like, what? Why? Like, and that was just like this light bulb of our experiences were drastically different, even in the same family, just being separated by 15 years.
I was gonna ask kind of, yeah, how those other siblings like look today, I guess, is kind of the question there. But like, yeah, what has their life shaped out to be? And obviously, you might not know every facet of everything, of their own. This is what they think of homeschooling, but like, how have you seen their life be different and like how they've had to overcome some of the obstacles that maybe you didn't have?
Of course, their story is their story.
Right.
So I will share a little bit of just my perspective. And it's just been more of, like I said, the opportunities that were presented. So I'll give you an example. When I was a kid in Pennsylvania, I remember at one of the god awful, pun intended, no pun intended, church services. We would go and meet with two other families in the second story of an Eagles building
Okay.
on Sundays, and we would have a Sunday school and break for lunch, and then we would have a second service. And so we were there from like 9 a.m. until 2 or 3. But I remember in the break once, one of my mom's friends looking at me and saying, Richard, you're really smart. You need to be an engineer.
Okay.
And I remember that vividly, and I became an engineer, and then I would not call myself an engineer anymore. Um, but that's just an example of like very clear expectations being set for, this is your IQ level, this is what we expect out of you, this is the direction. And as a kid, you hear those messages enough, like you're smart, you're capable, you're going to do great things. Like my dad would tell me, like, you're going to sit down with the president someday and have dinner with him. They didn't get that same message.
Right.
And so from the very beginning, it was like, Richard is on this path, and y'all are kind of going to be supportive characters in someone else's story.
Right.
um and so what I see with my sisters is that struggle as they got into adulthood, got married. It's like, no, I'm not just a supportive character. I am my own person. I get to one of my sisters is a writer. I get to do this,
Hmm.
right? I'm not just here to be a mom and a wife and take care of the house. But it's also challenging because the financial aspect of, without a college degree, you can't, there's just some doors that are not as easily open to you.
Right.
So that's kind of what I see. My younger brother, he went the trade school route, and he just got married last year, and he's doing well. So yeah, I'm really good friends with all my siblings, and they're all doing well. It's just I notice, like I said, from even from the earliest memories, being in a very sequestered environment, a very controlled environment, one that was heavily influenced by religion, that was very fundamentalist in nature, just kind of put us on these paths. And it's been easier for me because the path I was put on was a path to success, whereas
Right.
the path they were put on was a path to subservience in some
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah. I recently I joked in kind of a more serious way, but that I was like, I have it the easy side of everybody. It's like I'm a straight white guy. I live in
Yep.
Tennessee. Like, to your point, I always had that messaging from everybody in
Hmm.
that you're gonna do great things, you're super talented, you're all of these things. And I won't say that my sister didn't get messages like that. She's also very skilled in what she does. Um, and super talented and has a great life. But it's interesting how the expectations that are put on you, and then like, you know,
Mhm.
maybe you leave the picture and then the expectations change for your sibling and how they react to it. And they're like, I don't want to follow in the footsteps of so and so. Well, of course not, you know, or I don't want to do this. Well, like, you know, seeing
Right.
them push against that and become their own person is it's really it can be strange, but it's also really like a beautiful thing, right? Where you're like, okay, it's
Mhm.
amazing to see you now become this like full-fledged version of yourself and really lean into the things
Yeah.
that you're passionate about and that you care about, you know. And I appreciate your message of just also being like, parents, you need to tell like all your kids, like you're strong and
Yes.
capable and smart, and like you can do
Yes.
anything you set your mind to, right? There's no reason like
Yes.
that you can't. You know, everybody can go have dinner with the president, you know, or whatever they want to do, you know. Um,
Right.
that's yeah. So I think I want to kind of shift a little bit of like into post homeschool world, right? So like
Sure.
how did that shift look? You know, you're getting out in the real world.
Mhm.
You kind of mentioned like you lived at home while you went to college and did that, but you know, was that was there a point where that homeschool bubble maybe started to pop for you and you kind of were like, okay, now I'm in the real world?
Yeah, it was. So I graduated when I was 17, and I remember one of the positive things was, but again, it was only for the guys, so it's just this weird thing. But we had a church service where all the men in the church stood up and said, like, here's what I do for a living, here's where I went to college, here's kind of my success level. And based off of that conversation, my parents and I, mainly them, were like, okay, we think it's a good idea for you to have a blue collar skill and a white collar skill. Like, you are going to college, that's not really a question, but let's get you a blue collar skill first. So at 17, I took the GED so that it eliminated all of the transcript mess of you have to now record all your grades, and because we didn't really have that. Uh, so I took the GED, and then I started aircraft mechanics school. So I went from this like 17-year-old kid who really wasn't allowed to talk to girls and very socially awkward to being in a room of 30, like mid 20 to mid 30s mechanics who are also working real jobs, but also
Right.
getting their aircraft mechanics license. And it was a huge culture shock. I
Yeah.
mean, I was hearing jokes I had never heard before. I was hearing words I'd never heard before. I mean, I showed up in khakis and a button-down shirt that was buttoned all the way up to the top. I still remember, like, after some of us got to know each other better, one of the guys like literally reaching across the table and unsnapping my shirt and being like, "Stop buttoning your top button."
We all need people
And
like that in our lives. I had people like that when I got to
yes, we
college too, who
do.
we're like, yo, you sat me down and we're like, yo, you gotta chill the fuck out, man. Like,
Yes. Oh my God. And I was invited to house parties for the first time. I never went to any, but it was just a very, like I said, culture shock experience. And yet it was weirdly bounded because it was in Wichita, Kansas, and the community college I was going to was part of the Wichita public school system. So, like, no cell phones in class. I didn't have a cell phone, but no cell phones in class. And the Federal Aviation Administration requirements were very time based. So we had to show up at like 7:30 or 8 in the morning and stay until 2, even if we had our work done. Lots of pranks being played, people falling asleep on desks. Like, these guys were working second and third shift.
right.
But that's where some of my personality also started to come out of, like, "Well, that guy's falling asleep. Let's tie his shoelaces to the table so when he wakes up." So there was lots of that going on. And then partially through that experience, I needed a job. I had been working mainly mowing lawns, and that and Pell Grants were what paid for most of my college. So I went to work at a little avionics shop, and then 9/11 happened, and general aviation, like my entire career trajectory,
Yeah.
like took a nosedive. So I'd only worked there for 2 months. I started interviewing other places, ended up getting a job at Cracker Barrel. And that was a culture shock in the other direction, because here I was going to school, which with 30 guys, like blue collar guys, and now I'm in an environment that is primarily blue collar women, which is a way different place to be. And and so like at 18, I remember standing in the vestibule, and one of the gals who was training me, my parents had come into dinner, and I was like, there's my parents over there. And she's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go tell them we had sex in the parking lot, and then walked away. And I was freaking out. I was like, "Oh my god, you can't do that." And she saw, like, when she
The
came
color
back,
just
I'm my face was must have just been ashen, because she was like, "Oh, I honey, I would not do that to you." Like, I was so, but I loved both of those experiences, because that's what really got me out of my shell. Like
right.
I was one of the leaders, I would say, in my peer group, in the church, because the church was basically our only social group. And then going outside of that and just being hit with those two aspects of humanity was fantastic, and I would not have changed that in any way. I think it would have been shocking and possibly damaging to someone who wasn't already outgoing. But I loved it.
It's so interesting the like the experiences that then like you get out of it. And like I went to a small Christian college right out of high school, and so I kind of
Hmm.
took that like you, I was very much like I don't want to say I was like a leader, but like I was like big fish in a little pond in the homeschool world. And then I became like
Yeah.
a medium fish in this slightly larger pond, but that was also still very like Christian. And I was like, okay, cool. And then it wasn't until I got really out of that even that I was like, okay, now I'm working a job. I'm surrounded by people who have varying different beliefs. It was like I worked in a coffee shop. I managed a coffee shop, and it was great because we all believed different things. And so we would work, and we would, on Sunday I had to work the Sunday shift. And so I didn't get to go to church, but I would like afterwards we'd go out to lunch, and we would just all ask
Mm.
questions about our
So that's
upbringing and religion
fantastic.
and like all these things. And so we got to start to kind of like unpack all of our worldviews together. And it was very fun. And I think it was really it was the right timing for me because I was questioning my own religion, but it was the right timing because I was like, there is so much more out here than I would have ever
Mm.
known. And it made me
Yeah.
unafraid to ask dumb questions because we had this environment where it was like, I know I'm an idiot when it comes to all this stuff. I'm now in a safe environment where I can ask it and it's okay. And you guys are not, you might laugh at me or whatever, but like it's, it was a safe place to do it, instead
Yeah.
of like, I don't know. I think there's a level, you talked about the fear based aspect
Hmm.
of your homeschooling experience. And I don't necessarily think that my parents was really fear based, but there is that fear in the homeschool world of the outside. And so there is that as a kid, I just remember being scared of like asking anybody what made them different, right? If they were from outside that bubble, I didn't want to talk to them because they were scary. They were
Yes.
dangerous.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it truly is. So, okay, so you're going to college, you're working
Hmm.
Cracker Barrel, you're getting outside the bubble.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So I ended up graduating, and then went on to Wichita State University. So kind of the same as you, like one of the advantages that I think homeschooling did give to me was it was sink or swim, especially with when I got to subjects that were outside of my parents' comfort zone. Like
right,
I remember even in Pennsylvania explaining to my dad, like my math is getting hard, and I was probably like 11 or 12.
right,
And like I'm starting to learn about imaginary numbers. And at this time, it's literally reading the Abeka book and trying to understand math.
right.
And he was like, oh, you're like beyond where I ever got in school. I don't even understand what imaginary numbers are. And I was like, oh my God. Um, but yeah, so I got to college, real college, still living at home, um, worked 2 to 3 jobs pretty much the entire way, did summer school. And one of the goals of higher education was obviously to get a job, but that ties back into the purity culture and like you can't have sex until you get married. You can't get married until you are ready to lead a family. You're not ready to lead a family until you have a high paying job. And ideally, you have a house that's paid for as well. I didn't hit that goal, but I hit the other goals. And so it was very much this like, I am, I'm not living in the moment, which has been a huge struggle for me as I've kind of come out of that religion and come out of those experiences of I spent so much of my life trying to get to a point where life could start. And then once life started, I was like, fuck, what what is the point? Like, what do we do now? Like, I've
Right.
got a house, got a wife, I can finally have sex. Now what?
Hmm.
And so I look back on my college and while I'm grateful for the experiences that I did have, things I hear other people talk about college, like my wife, who I'm divorced and remarried, she had a much more normal experience. But like she has friends from college that she dormed with that she's still friends with today. We went and stayed with them a few months ago with one of them, and I don't have that concept of like I had a study group and we went out to the bars and because um I'd get up usually between 3 and 4 in the morning and work and study. I would study for 2 to 3 hours. I would go to class and then I would go work one of my jobs and then I would go find a place to do homework. And my senior year, I like to joke like I probably slept 2 hours a day because it was just every time I walked past my bed and looked at it, I would just kind of fall into it and sleep for a couple hours and then get up and do the next thing. But I think that the homeschooling experience of I had to be a self-starter and I had to run my own schedule or I wasn't going to hit these milestones that I had set for myself, really helped me through that experience. It's just like, wish I had had the friend experience
Yeah.
too. Two things, the friend experience, and also I didn't get a B until I was in my senior year.
Oh,
And I remember the relief of getting that B and realizing, and it was like literally out of my control. My professor was like a brilliant jerk, and I scored higher than every other graduate student in the class, and he still gave me a B because my schedule or my it was based on 2 exams. My second exam score was lower than my first exam score, and he's like, "You have not demonstrated learning in this class." But it was outside of my control for the
right.
first time. Could not get an A,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my! I wish I had done this sooner." And then I got like 3 B's my last semester. So I was like, "What's the point? I'm still going to graduate with a high GPA."
Yeah.
Um, but
That's
yeah,
funny.
I have a couple of people who I'm still a little bit connected to from that college experience, but for the most part, it was just like a checkbox to the goal I was trying to get to.
Well, that also plays back to, and we hadn't really talked on this, but like friendships growing up of like
Mhm.
inside of the homeschool world. I know for me, I have a lot of friends still from when I was a homeschooler. I have friends from college. But my mom strategically put us in co-ops and community and things like that because she knew that that was like she knew that that was the danger zone or one of the weird things about homeschooling. She's like everyone says
Mhm.
antisocial. That's the thing, and so I
Yeah.
think she had this fear that I don't want my kid to be antisocial, so I'm going to push. I don't want to say too far, but she really pushed the like have friends, go to houses, go
Yeah.
like we had other parents, teacher or other kids, parents were our teachers as well. So there was like very much there was community, and we did things outside of just school together as well. We did dances and sports together and all that kind of stuff. But you
Wait,
know,
you did dances?
yeah, yeah. So we had
I
swing
love that
dances.
for you.
Yeah, no, it was so much fun. When I was 12 years old, my mom stuck me in a swing dance class. And so I learned swing dance and ballroom, which again, very homeschool coded
Oh yeah.
weirdness, right? But it was so much fun, and did that all through high school, did that some of college as well. Like, I was the guy. If you talk to my friends from growing up, that I was the guy who really eventually took over and led the charge of that whole thing, taught for a couple years and
Oh,
stuff
I
like that.
love
So
that.
it was a lot of fun. It was really cool. And we had a community that was willing to like put on school dances. So we kind of had
Mm,
some of these normal things.
yeah.
We did school dances. We partnered with a Christian school and did prom. We had
Hmm.
yearbook. Like we had a lot of the kind of traditional school things, field trips, all that kind of stuff
Nice.
existed. And so it's different when I talk to somebody who was public school, but at the same time there's
Hmm.
very much a similarity between like, well, yeah, we also did that. It just looked a little different, but
Right.
it was the same. And so, but for you growing up, especially in Pennsylvania, where you're the first homeschool family, are you friends with anybody? Are you friends with kids in the neighborhood? Like what? Like like or is it just like a very stereotypical homeschool where it's like, "Oh, my sister is my best friend." You know? And then like in high school like, "Yeah, we did prom, but it was in the basement and I went with my mom." Like
Oh my God. So it's interesting because my experience in Pennsylvania was quite a bit different. And of
Right.
course it would be because I was older when we moved to Kansas, but in Pennsylvania that fear was so visceral of like the truancy officer is going to come, the
Right.
social workers like my mom literally we had this old piano next to our front door in our house, and there were two things sitting on there, and one was a tape recorder and the other was a gun,
Oh
because
my
we were
God.
going to record
Right.
what the conversation, and if they tried to take us, she was going to shoot them. And like saying that out loud, like that's so fucking bizarre. Like what
Yeah.
is this? But it was just we were scared of everything. I can remember, like, of course, Halloween was not okay in any way, shape, or form. And so kids from the neighborhood would come by and trick or treat. And I remember hiding under the kitchen table because they were dressed up like devils or goblins or what. And they probably weren't, but that's what we were told. Like,
Right.
this is an evil holiday. Like, this is the day that evil runs rampant in the land. And so we're like going to hunker down and protect ourselves. Um, and in Pennsylvania, there were mainly three families that I can remember that we interacted with. There were a couple of other families that were kind of on the fringe, but we were we were one of two families who pretty much only homeschooled in our friend group. The others did kind of a mixture of public school and homeschooling.
Okay.
And um, as far as friends, in Pennsylvania, there was one guy who was a year older than I was, but he was the closest boy. And then there was my sisters and a few girls who were my age. So especially early on, I hung out with the girls,
Hmm.
because like you wouldn't think that, like today we think of a year age difference as like that's not a big deal, but developmentally when you're like 6 and 7 or 7 and 8,
Right.
that's huge.
Yeah.
Um, so so and that, interestingly enough, has played into even today where I struggle to make friends, particularly with guys. And I'm much more comfortable talking to women, much more I make friends much easier with women. And it's something that I've actually worked on in therapy as to how do I relate to other men? Um how do I make friends with guys? And when we got to Pennsylvania, or when we got to Kansas, that changed quite a bit because we were going to oh a cult, but just the pool was a lot bigger, and there were more like 15 to 20 families there. And so there were boys who were my age, very close in age, um, and so I made a lot of friends. Still didn't we really didn't do sleepovers. We didn't there was we did some field trips together. My ex's family was she's the oldest of 10 kids, and mostly girls. And I had been infatuated with her since I had been 14. And so I would like my entire so like my goal of I need to get a job, I need to finish college was like very much, you
Right.
know, aimed at this very specific person. Um, but that family was a bit more liberal as you could be in this very fundamentalist. So like they watched movies, they did dance classes, like they were in symphony. So in because I was constantly trying to be a part of their world, that did get me exposed in my later years to things like I did take like some line dancing classes with them. They did these things, they called them era nights, where you could dress up like a historical figure
Okay.
and show up and give a speech. um so we did some fun things like that. I think the apologies if I get emotional. But what changed was when I got married, and I wasn't allowed to leave the church until I got married. And by leave the church, I mean leave that specific group of people.
Okay.
And as soon as I got married, I did. And that pretty much ended my friendships with everyone in that group. Like all of my groomsmen, my best man, like I can count on one hand the times I've talked to them, because after I left, and based on some of the choices I've made, they've made it very clear to me that, you know, they don't want to be part of my life.
Right.
And the interactions that I did have with them, I think it was I think it was mutual in some ways, because the interactions I started having with them were basically them saying like, "Hey, let's go to lunch," and then they would tell me like, "We think you're sinning in this way, and you need to shape up." And I'm like, I'm not gonna like
Yeah.
no.
It's your life to live. You get to make your own
Exactly.
decisions. Yeah.
Right. So it's been interesting moving from that. So that was in Kansas, and then when we did get into a really good small group of what we called young marrieds in the church that we started going to. Um, but then over time, I started questioning religion, questioning Christianity more and more, and then uh, that kind of ended that round of friendships as well. And then most of that all was severed when I moved down here to Texas, and I've started. So I've been here for about 7 years, and of course, a year and a half after we got here, we were real close with a couple down here. They were our friends, so we moved down, and he died of COVID, and then I lost my job during COVID, and then this remote working world. So it's like it's really been within the last year to where I've started getting out into the community. I did some very focused trauma healing and therapy, and that has opened me up to like now we have a friend group, we play bingo with them, we play trivia with them, we
Yeah.
hang out with them, and that has been such an amazing experience to because I've always been one who chases other people.
Hmm.
And I think that going all the way back to like the guy I wanted to be my best friend was older than me and had interests that were more advanced than mine. And so I was always chasing him. And this concept of like real friends are it's mutual.
Right.
Like there's not one person who's doing everything and trying to get everyone together. Like it just happens, has been so fantastic and so healing for me. I can't even describe it.
Everything you're saying is resonating with me significantly. I mean, you talked about COVID and the work from home. I literally quit. I worked in a restaurant. I quit my job. Was like so stoked. I do podcast editing, so I was like, I'm gonna be like the greatest podcast editor in the Nashville area. I'm gonna go to the cool little coffee shops. I'm gonna be that dude who like sits and works on his laptop and has big headphones and like looks super cool. Like I had this whole plan. I knew the groups I was gonna get connected with and like how I was gonna network and all this stuff. And then COVID just really came down and stopped all of that. And for two
Yeah.
years, it was very much just stuck inside, going stir crazy.
Yep.
I have my wife, but like it was just, you get to a point where sometimes you just want to bite the head off of the only person you get to see. It's like it was
Yes.
insane. And that is honestly where this show stemmed from, because I literally was so depressed and so just like
Mm,
irritable and awful. And I was like, I have no friends. Nobody's called me.
mm,
Nobody's texted me.
mm,
And I'm thankful for my wife, because she goes, well, I think you should just you talk about these people, just text them and say hi and see what happens. And that's where this show came from, because I texted my high school buddies and I just said, hey, like I'm hurting, I need something, I just want to talk, like that's all. And it really started these conversations of like, let's talk about, we're coming up on a year. I mean, we've passed that now, but at the time we were coming up on 10 years of being out of the homeschool world. How have we changed? What has shifted for us? Where are we now? What do we believe? What's different? And it started this show. And then from there it sprungboard into, okay, now like I have my virtual community of reconnecting with these people, and I have those skills again. Now I got to go find that community that exists here, and I can be in
yeah.
person with them. And so, yeah, I think in that regard, I think it's a tough time to be alive and be a guy, because
Yeah.
guys don't know how to be friends. We just don't,
Hmm.
and we're kind of we're having to learn. Um, and like you said, it can't always just be a give, give, give. It's got to be a little bit
Right.
of a give and take kind of a situation. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think male friendship in general is very important, especially as adults. But it's it's something that I think a lot of homeschool kids, we get out of it. Like you said, there's this drive to like go, 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 go and
Yeah.
get to a specific point, and we hit that, and then we just don't know
Hmm.
what to do anymore. And it's like,
Right.
it's time to create that new set of goals, people. It's time to kind of set that new expectation of what do you want out of life, and who do you want it to be a part of it, and those types of things. And
Mm.
so, yeah, like I said, I really resonate with what you're saying there, because it's just,
Yeah.
I
Thank
feel
you so
that.
much for sharing, Jacob. And that, like, I hope that you're able to take deep breaths and you're able to know that where you are today, you're okay and you're good. And that there's not, if all you accomplished was what you have to this point and connecting the people that you have and forming the relationships, like that would be enough.
Yeah, I agree with you. I piss people off when I say this, but especially like my wife and my parents, but I'm like, if I died today, I'm good. I did it. Like, I have to live my
Right.
life that way, because there's no, like, of course, there's other things I would love to accomplish, right? Who doesn't have that in their life? But at the same time, you gotta, like you said, you gotta be okay with, I did, I did what I did. I'm happy with what I got,
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if I can, we're not promised tomorrow. Like,
Right.
we're not promised the
Right.
rest of today. Um, but it's so much easier, I think, to live life in that mindset and be kind of a little bit happier and a little bit more content with what you've got,
Mm-hmm.
than it is to just be like, well, no, I got to get to that next thing, got to be working to that next thing. It
Yeah.
gets tiring. It burns you out. It's not fun anymore. And
It
we get
does.
one life. We got to make it fun, right? It's got
Yeah.
to be fun.
It's got to be fun. We've got to, yeah. I'm so much so in that. Oh my God. It's fascinating to hear your experience too, because the what you said about men in relationships and how challenging it can be to feel like my success has been from sitting behind a computer and just banging away at my job and learning and getting better and better, and then starting to be like, why am I so exhausted at the end of the day? All I've done is sit in front of a computer. And it's funny, I went and hung out with a friend of mine, and I was working, he was working, but his job is vastly different than mine. And after a couple hours, he was like, you work harder than any remote worker than I've ever seen. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, when you're in a meeting, you're on, because I'm like literally on Zoom calls almost all day
Right.
long. And I was like, yeah. But what I realized about 8 months ago is that I was missing in-person time, and I was missing being part of an actual physical community. Like I I am friends with a couple, interestingly enough, a couple of girls, one girl that was one of the original homeschooling friends that I grew up with in Pennsylvania. Like, she and I have gotten reconnected in the last couple of years, but you need that in-person time. And I had this kind of period of euphoria, almost mania, after I did a bunch of trauma healing, and I was like, all of a sudden I have all this energy and I want to go connect with everyone. And um, I started a business, which is Bastrop Coworking. So I live in Bastrop, Texas,
Yeah.
and I was like, I need to get out and I need to be around people. And there's not a spot for that in my downtown. But I've been part of a gym community for several years, and I've kind of floated in and out of the community, and they've really been there for me through some tough times, and I love them dearly. But I wasn't connecting, because, spoiler alert, once you get into your 40s, if you're not doing CrossFit every day of the week and you do it like once or twice, you are going to injure yourself. And then you're going to spend 6 weeks recovering, and then you're going to repeat that process until it finally
Yeah.
gets through your thick skull that maybe I shouldn't try to do 100 pull-ups at the same time on the same day in a row. Um, but it was this opportunity to where I was like, okay, there's a little office space in the building that the gym is in. If I can connect with some of those same people, but then just literally show up and be around people.
Yeah.
And that's what has gotten us ultimately connected to this new friend group that we're a part of, more involved in the community, actually getting out of the house, and giving myself permission to um, let not let go. It's hard to say because I'm still working through this, but the concept of, like, I am not tied to this desk and to this computer for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Like, I can go work from a
Right.
coffee shop. I can go to a co-working space. I can go physically be around other people. And I not only can but I need to. I need
Yeah.
to, because I don't want to spend the next, you know, 20 years of my career sitting here only connecting with people virtually.
Right.
So, and that goes all the way back to what we were talking about from Pennsylvania, and even in Kansas, somewhat of that. Academically, I think I did very, very well in homeschooling.
Hmm.
Um, my learning modalities matched the ability to be able to pick up a textbook and read it and understand the concepts. Um, but that's one of my biggest fears when people say, "Oh, I'm going to homeschool my kids." It's like, it does not work for everyone. And unless you are truly an expert at all aspects of reading and writing and arithmetic, but also all of the social skills and the understanding what learning disabilities and learning challenges look like that is the power of going to a place where there are educators who have made it their career to understand childhood development, who have made it their career to understand, at 13, these are the concepts that a 13-year-old brain on average can understand. And even at 42 years old, I'm still learning things socially that I quote unquote should have learned
Right.
in high school. When like even the concept of like not everything is black and white. I joke with my wife that if I ever write an autobiography, a working title is Ascent to Gray, because learning that the world is not black and white and that people are not good or bad,
Right.
and that there are all these different personalities. One of my favorite parts of my job now is that I get to teach people, run them through a personality test,
Hmm.
and then talk about like there's no like better personality than another, but we need to understand these so that we can
Right.
communicate well together. But a lot of that is like me having these aha moments in my 40s, like, oh my God, I just figured out how this aspect of the world works. And everyone else was like, yeah, RB, like, good for you. We've known that for a long time. But in a way, I get to approach some of these things from that like childhood curiosity of like, I didn't learn this before. And I feel like that's where the true choice for me is as a human, is I can look back, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I get stuck in the rut of like, God damn it, why did I not learn this? Why was my education experience what it was? Why was my sister's what it was? Instead of, and what I want to be is like, whether I learned it before or not is really irrelevant. Today is what matters.
Right.
And I can have that childhood sense of curiosity and joy today and connect with that in some very real ways. And I'll give you just an example. And this is silly, and there's so many people that are like, that's so silly. But I have this little bag that I carry around, and I hand these lizards out to people.
Okay.
It's a little tiny, and just a resin lizard. It glows in the dark. Um, but it's just this childhood, like, I get to give this little toy out to people, and you would not believe how like the people who look the grumpiest and like they're having a terrible day, and I'm like, would you like a lizard? And most of them are like, what are you talking about? And then I'm like, no, like it's just a little toy. And they're just like,
Yep.
their face lights up. So yeah, all of that to say is I feel like one of the things I missed was that social aspect of being around a peer group, learning those relationships. But that means I get to do that today, and with the knowledge and experience that 40-year-old me does. And I do silly things, and
Yeah.
that's just me. And I
Yeah.
think people are drawn to me because of that.
I think that's a really important message. And like, I was gonna ask you the question of like, what do you say to homeschool parents who are thinking about it? And I think ultimately, I this show has become this. I have realized that part of the reason for the show is to be a resource for people who are thinking about homeschooling, to hear stories
Mm,
like yours, to hear stories like mine, to hear stories like my friends, because there is a case to be made that homeschooling can work and you can do it, but
absolutely.
also there's a lot of pitfalls you can fall into. So
Mhm.
take the stories that you're hearing and listen to them and go, okay, like I can change this or I can tweak this or I can give this to my kids. But also just understanding that like I think every parent, hopefully, maybe not every parent, this is maybe the really looking at the best in everybody, but every parent should want the best for their kid. And I think that every parent does want the
Mhm.
best for their kid.
I think
And
so
that
too.
looks different for everybody.
Hmm.
But I kind of I look at it and I go, every kid is designed differently, and some kids operate better in the public school system, in the private school
Hmm.
system, and in a homeschool system with private educators. Whatever it is, figure out what works for that kid and be the strongest advocate to get them to where they need to go.
Hmm.
And and try to give them the best. It's never going to be perfect. Like
Right.
that's just the reality. It's never going to be perfect,
Right.
but we can kind of continue that iteration of like you said it at the beginning. I've been doing a lot of research of like the trauma that gets passed down people to people, right? And so it's
Mm,
like
yeah.
my grandpa maybe wasn't the greatest person and he screwed up my dad in this way, but my dad is a better person, right? And then my
Hmm.
dad screwed me up in this way, but I'm a better person. And then the next generation, and I can pass that on to the next people, right? And so I think that's the point is like continue to grow and continue to educate yourself. You talked about it within just your own life of like rather than be stuck in the past of I didn't learn this, oh, woe is me. You get to learn it today.
Right.
Like, and there's so much more resources today. So it's like you get to learn it way better than you would have learned it way back then anyways, you know? So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
well, I
I
appreciate
love
you,
that.
RB. This has been a great conversation, and I love just like your take on life and things like that. I do want to give you the opportunity, shout out your Instagram, your business one more time. So if people are in the Texas area and listening, or if
Right.
they're not in the Texas area, the great thing about the internet is we can follow each other on Instagram and things like that. But shout out what you got going on, and so people know.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. I've really enjoyed this conversation too. And as I stated before, I think maybe in our previous conversation, a lot of what's happening in even in Texas and even in the small town that I'm in, where we're talking about school vouchers, we're talking about private school, we're talking about homeschooling, and I just so value conversations like this because I don't want my gut reaction when someone says, "Oh, I'm going to homeschool my kids," or "I'm homeschooling my kids," be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Because it is, but that's my experience. And so I think exactly what you said is there are multiple ways that kids learn, and ultimately, I do believe every parent is trying to do the right thing for their kids. And I'm just going to give my wife is a public educator. She has been for 20 plus years. So there's an aspect to this which would be interesting to explore that I just know a little bit about, but it is for those folks who are not privileged, who the parents don't have the time to sit down and think, what does my kid need? What kind of learning style do they have? What would work best for them, right? Because they're working two jobs and they're, they're poor. I mean, I grew up poor, but there's a lot of people who public school is so important, as that's the only opportunity they have to learn. So I'm just going to give a plug for public education. And if someone is listening to this and having that, I'm open, I'm willing to talk. So I'll give a plug for my Instagram. So it's at Flyer Brown, because I thought I was going to be a pilot when I was a kid. So FLIERBROWN. And then my business is at Bastrop Cowork on Instagram as well. So yeah, if anyone wants to connect or has questions, I'm more than happy to chat. And
Yeah.
Jacob, thank you again. This has been fantastic, and I'm so glad we got connected.
Yeah, no, I really am too. I'm glad you sent me. It was like a cold DM or something like that, and that some of the greatest conversations I've had on the show had come from people that like I don't know, right? Like I thought that the show was gonna for the longest time just be people that I had known that we lost contact with, and it has reached more people than I ever could have imagined, and so it's great to have conversations like this. I'm gonna put all of RB's stuff down in the description as well. So if you can't find it, it's gonna be linked. And along with the newsletter and my Instagram and my TikTok and all of the stuff, it's down below. If you enjoyed it, like, comment,
Follow him,
share,
folks.
follow, all that stuff. Yeah, do all of the internet things that you know at this point what you need to do. So,
And if
um,
any of my friends are seeing this, reach out to Jacob and tell him your story. Because
yeah.
like the more people we get talking about this, and Jacob's doing an amazing job of just creating this community, and I love it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, of course. Like RB said, reach out. I'm always looking for new people to interview and hear their experience. That's the whole goal. Even if you don't want to record it and put it out in the world, if you just want to have a conversation, I'm down. Okay, we'll hop on a call, we'll chat. That is what the whole point of this is to build. We've been talking about friendships and community. That's what I want to do here. You are not alone. Our homeschool experiences they're unique, but they are not isolated. So yeah, with that, reach out to me, exhsclub@gmail.com. And until next week, we'll see you. Okay. Peace.